Chelsea set a valuation of 120 million, which is very high.
Guardiola was phenomenally demanding of the players.
Just this change means there's a question mark over them as well. Yeah, I think Arsenal are pretty strong favourites.
I'm sat here going, look at all the players they've got. They're surely still going to be good. Hello and welcome to The Game, football podcast from The Times and Sunday Times. A meaningless kickabout or a sign of things to come? Arsenal comfortably beat Manchester City 3-0 in the Community Shield, and on today's show, we'll ask what it means for the reigning champions and new Manchester City manager Enzo Maresca. We'll also discuss Chelsea, take a closer look at the relegation battle, and ask who needs more signings in the final weeks of the transfer window. I'm Tom Clarke, and joining me today we have the senior sports writer and Sunday Times columnist Alyson Rudd, the football reporter who covers clubs in the south of England with a focus on Chelsea, it's Peter Rutzler, and the former footballer turned journalist Gregor Robertson is alongside me as usual. Team, here we go. It's Premier League preview week, part 1 or part 9 in mine and Alyson's case, because we've been doing it for the last couple of weeks already. We've got Gregor back and Pete back as well. So as I mentioned there, fascinating little battle in Wales in the Community Shield. Things I never thought I'd say in pre-season, but there you go. I think it probably did tell us quite a few things about how this season might start, at least, even if it's not about how this season might finish. Gregor, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think you kind of the sort of hierarchy was crystallised a little bit by this game, the Arsenal's performance in particular. Look, the Community Shield on the whole, it doesn't mean anything really. I think it's 8 of the 34 winners since the Premier League started have actually gone on to win the title, so it doesn't mean anything essentially. But in the performance itself, Arsenal were totally dominant, really. I mean, there were the odd pocket where City kind of found a bit of space in the box and Haaland had a half chance of what he looked a bit of a yard off it. There's players still finding their feet, Anderson the same. But Arsenal looked like Arsenal, and I think that's pretty ominous for the rest of the league.
That's an interesting way of phrasing it, isn't it, Alyson? And you I think you agree because you said yes when I was asking the question, which is a very rare success for me on this podcast. But Gregor saying Arsenal look like Arsenal is maybe what we're going to see in these early stages of the season, whilst we're waiting for all these new managers to make their mark on these teams, and we start going, well, that's Maresca's City, that's Alonso's Chelsea, that's Iraola's Liverpool. Arsenal can just be Arsenal.
Yeah, they looked like a team that haven't had to go through a transition, but they actually didn't look like Arsenal in a sense. They looked better than Arsenal. They were
better than the Arsenal of last season.
Yes, they were more enjoyable to watch. They were a joy to watch. They were playing attractive football. They were not reliant upon set pieces. There was a boisterousness to them for sure, and they looked pretty mean at the back in terms of how much they're going to concede there. But I felt there was a joyousness to the way they played, as epitomised by Martin Odegaard. And we've said on previous podcasts, let's hope we get the Odegaard we saw at the World Cup, who was smiley Marty. We liked him, but he looked like that at the Millennium Stadium. He looked like somebody who's, I don't know, switched with a doppelganger or something in terms of attitude and
his energy
demeanour.
as well. Confidence. We keep talking about it, don't we? But
it's
so
like
remarkable.
Someone else slipped into the position when no one was looking because he wanted to go on holiday or something. And then he's come back refreshed and enjoyed the World Cup, come back refreshed. His goal was a thing of beauty, sort of thing when he first peaked at Arsenal, you were expecting week on week. Then it disappeared, and I know he had injury problems, and that can be an absolute terrible thing to bear for a player. And it means if you're 5% off it, you look like you're awful, and you're not. You just know what you were. But he leads by example, and if he's smiling, you sort of felt everyone else felt they should smile as well. And so there was an absolute a sense that they were enjoying themselves. As Gregor says, you can do that in the Community Shield.
Yeah.
And there was a bit of joking afterwards, wasn't there? I mean, how much should you even celebrate winning it? Don't want to get so they were excused. They were excused celebrating it because what they're really celebrating is another chance to celebrate winning the title.
Yeah.
So that's fine. You're sort of doing it as a sort of cohort of success. But I thought it wasn't just that Arsenal didn't look like a team that have had to struggle with new manager or loads of new players. They looked like a team that are progressing from where they were, where they finished. And what we hoped to see was a team that played more attractive football, and they've proven. If they don't now, then that's a huge shame because they've proven that they can.
Pete?
I think with Arsenal, my sort of concern with them, obviously they've got the stability of having a manager who's been there for a long time, was just, how fit are they going to be? Like, how much has last season taken out of them? How much has the World Cup year taken out of them? Declan Rice come back late, not involved, and Bukayo Saka, blah, blah, blah. But
yeah,
I think
that's
the
the
one
Saliba
thing,
injury to contend with as
exactly.
well. Yeah.
And I think that was probably the bigger takeaway for me, is that actually their baseline is so good, it's much higher.
Right.
And I think the midfield felt very different. Obviously, Declan Rice wasn't playing, but Miles Lewis-Skelly played exceptionally well. Obviously, there's been a bit of noise around him, and I wondered how much
Lovely
that
pass.
might have
What a lovely pass for that first goal. Ah, beautiful.
And turn.
Yeah, turn and pass.
The spatial awareness
the kind
is
of
great,
turn and
yeah.
pass that, again, if it was in a Premier League game or in a Champions League game, we'd be waxing lyrical about it. But because it's in the first minute of a Community Shield game, you're like, oh, good pass. Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
But then also Bruno Guimaraes, just that balance. I think the one thing about him is that he can play forward, he can play between the lines. And if you're a Martin Odegaard, that's great. You want someone finding you in those pockets. And it was just quite a nice, refreshing, different sort of feel potentially for Arsenal. But I think there's a maturity about them. They know what they're doing. This is 6 years into Arteta now, and that's a massive advantage. And I think that's sort of what came across.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is they scored up inside 30 seconds. It kind of changed the dynamic of the game. Like, we saw a bit more of a freewheeling Arsenal, but they were 3-0 up within 48 minutes. It was like, and that was a lot to do with positive play. It was also to do with City leaving them spaces. I totally back up what Alyson's saying about Odegaard. The confidence is surging through him. His little nutmeg on Anderson in the first half. The turn on Rico Lewis in the second half that opened up the space that almost, I think Saka shot when he could have crossed for Havertz. There's little moments that he's got a swagger. So if he can stay fit, that's enormous. Despite, forget the signings. Odegaard on his A game is so big for Arsenal. But again, what Pete's saying is true. The midfield, their options, Lewis Skelly's emergence, Bruno, the profile of Bruno was kind of perfect because he can do a bit of everything. That's the kind of player Arsenal really needed. Rice still to come back. Got Marino, you've got Zubamendi. There's going to be some unhappy players. Another thing I would say is Calafiori kind of making so many of those underlapping runs that gives Tzolis, the new signing, the space. And that's an interesting dynamic to see.
Into the FPL team.
Yeah,
Calafiori.
that's what I was thinking watching this game.
Movement.
Everyone's going to put him in, isn't they? But galloping down.
He's done that a lot.
Wing.
He's done that a lot before, but the player outside him has not been someone. Trossard had great spells last season. Martinelli had the odd flourish. That's been a bit of a problem area, and there's still, obviously, you guys have spoken about this before. There was talk about Vinny Jr. There's been talk about a big like statement signing, maybe Rodgers. Zolz has come in as a bit under the radar, and he's had a really positive start. We'll see whether he's going to be the guy to hang their hat on. But
that's my only thing on him is, again, in this context. And I read Gary Jacobs' excellent piece on the Times website this morning about this signing, and it's great. But if you're going to go to the next level, as we always talk about, you don't go into a Charity Shield game and go, oh, well done to the new lad no one had ever heard about. Good, that'll do, that'll do. Because that won't do in March in the Champions League quarter-final or something. Like, you are the best team now. You're the best team in the league. You won the league. Great signs in this game. But you don't go, oh, lovely, well done. This new lad's quite friendly and good, isn't he?
In the friendlies leading up to the Community Shield, he's been getting a lot of praise from the staff at Arsenal. Yeah. They really do like him. And brilliant. You can follow his trajectory.
Cleans up after himself, nice lad. But, come on, we need to beat PSG, Alyson.
We have to stop assuming that if someone didn't cost 120 million quid, they don't fit your model. It might be just happens to be perfect. As Gregor said, his relationship with Calafiori might be the perfect thing to open up that wing for Arsenal. I have heard brilliant things about him, so I was really looking forward to seeing how he would play, and he did not disappoint.
There we go. Were you going to stick him in your fantasy football team as well?
I'm giving up fantasy football because it ruins your life.
That's so funny because that's the subject of my newsletter today. I want Times readers to decide whether I'm giving it up. Anyway, make sure you check your inboxes later. Yeah, because I might be. We're talking kind of heading towards the kind of symbolism, aren't we? And I think for Arsenal, even in just that first minute of the defence, it felt like a kind of battleship style kind of attack. They got the ball from kick-off, the defence moves up, everyone moves up. But it was interesting to see City retreat, wasn't it? And I think bringing them in, Was this an early sign of the kind of Pep aura has gone now? I can't work them out. I keep saying, and I've said with Alyson on our 53 Premier League preview shows that we've already done in the last couple of weeks, I am still convinced Manchester City will be good. But this game then made me think, or are all the people who are talking about Pep, Bernardo Silva, and now Rodri leaving, this will not be the Manchester City of old? What do we think?
No, I think Manchester City will still be an effective side this season. I think Gregor's right about the fact that Arsenal scored so early. He had that couple of openings where Doku's got turned into space. There was a chance for Haaland, which he skews over the bar. I think it reflected things we already knew, which is the midfield is an issue that they clearly want to and are going to address before the end of the window. And as much as this is a transition away from Pep Guardiola, this is a transition away from Rodri, who we now know is definitely going to Barcelona. Last time City were without Rodri, what was that, 2024? Was it when he injured his ACL? It was against Arsenal. They finished off the pace, didn't they? Liverpool won the league. So we know that taking Rodri out of the team is a problem. And now you're doing that with a new coach. They've signed Elliot Anderson. I think the positioning of Elliot Anderson yesterday was different, and it didn't necessarily make him look comfortable.
How?
Yeah, he was playing sort of to the right, in the right pocket. He wasn't playing as a deep six like we've seen with England. Didn't have the same number of touches.
Do you think which of those do you think he's better at, or do you think this is a challenge that he's been set, or do you think it's too early to say yet?
It's too early to say, I think, in terms of how Maresca wants his build-up.
I think Maresca really likes Kovacic, and that's why he did
that.
And I think that this proved that he can't rely on Kovacic.
Yes, exactly.
Kovacic has the brains.
Yeah.
Honestly, his vision is still phenomenal. He doesn't have the athleticism anymore.
So you think this is him saying, I want Kovacic, but 5 years ago.
Yes.
So then those comments he makes after the game, we need more players and things, which I'm sure your average football fan would be going, you what, mate? You what? You need more players with that squad. You've got Erling Haaland up front. You've got Doku's just got a new contract. Just spent 116 million on Elliot Anderson. You want new players? Don't know you're born. But is that what he's talking about?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you look at the ones they're looking at, so there's Ayoub Bouadi, Morocco midfielder, who's an unbelievable talent at Lille. He's much more of a six. He's very young, so it feels like a lot of pressure to put him into that role. Enzo Fernández isn't that player. He's the kind of player that will want to break forward.
What's your understanding of the Enzo Fernández situation? Obviously, you wrote on the Times website at the weekend about this kind of deadline that Chelsea had set clubs to make a bid. Where is it at the moment on this time of recording on Monday?
I think from a Chelsea perspective, they just want the sort of circus to end. Over Enzo Fernández, because this goes back to the end of last season.
Yeah.
They crash out of the Champions League, lose 8-2. Fernández comes out and tells Spanish media, I don't know if I'm going to be here next season. That's been rumbling on all summer. There was the talk, him saying, I'd love to live in Madrid, and Real Madrid then come out in the middle of summer and go, we're not interested, mate. Chelsea set a valuation of 120 million, which is very high. So the point of this deadline was, they're saying, right, they communicated to Enzo Fernández representatives in May, it'll cost 120 million pounds to sell him. If we can get a club that will pay that money, we'll let you go. Here are the payment terms. This is how we want the money broken down. That's regarded as off the table. As far as they're concerned, they see him as he's going to be involved this season. Now, realistically, transfer window closes September 1st. If a club today puts 120 million or some offer in that ballpark on the table, I don't think Chelsea are just going to ignore it.
Right.
It's kind of just a way of going, let's hurry this up, let's focus minds, let's get this sorted, because he's a key player, he's a big player, and if he goes, they'll need to replace him.
Yeah.
So let's see. And I think
they should bite their hands off.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll come back to Chelsea in a second, because we're going to talk about them in more detail. But just on City, Gregor, not had your view on them in terms of where they'll be. I'm sat here going, look at all the players they've got. They're surely still going to be good. What about this Pep aura then? What about this idea
that was eroded last season?
You think it had already gone?
Yeah. I mean, we spoke about that a lot last season.
Yeah.
And yes, they came back fairly strongly at the end, and they almost made a title race of it. But I think that was beginning to be chipped away at. And I said for much of last season and a bit of the season before that just a lot of the serial winners who were like mainstays of the team have departed. As you've already said, even more have departed now. Yes, they've got hugely talented footballers, but they're not serial winners like the City group have been for so long. Like Anderson's a great signing. We could talk about where, he played in that little late kind of inside right place, and there was one cross in the first half that Haaland wasn't quite on the same wavelength, and you thought that's Kevin De Bruyne-esque, like in that little inside right pocket. He can do that. He's not Kevin De Bruyne, but he's got a great delivery. He could play the 6. He can be any of those positions. He's a great player, great signing. So, and Buhari would be a big signing. So I'm sure they will sign someone in midfield. But there are just question marks like, what Doku are you going to get? He was great last season, ended last season brilliantly. Is Foden going to be rejuvenated? I think there's question marks about Ruben Dias at the back. Guardiola's kind of been in and out with injuries.
But then do you not counter that by going, Kusanov was much better at the end of last season? They signed Mark Gay, he's probably the most consistent centre-back.
He played right back in this, and then you've seen that he wants O'Reilly to step in midfield and then form a 3, so there's a bit of a... Like City have done that in the past, but Maresca always... He was quite wedded to that at Chelsea, and you think that's going to be the way they play.
Specifically on Diaz, and particularly the way Maresca wants his team to play, their build-up is very formulaic. It's very patterns, it's 3 and a 2. The central centre-back, which caused, there was loads of talk about that. Once Levi Colwill got injured last season for Chelsea, he wanted a replacement because of his distribution.
Right.
Is Diaz that player for City? Do
you think they've got that player at all?
As in, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Right.
You think about some of the bigger players. John Stones could have done that role really, really effectively. The other question mark is Donnarumma, which is, for me, was always, we've talked about Sanchez at Chelsea. Donnarumma is a similar kind of profile. He's a fantastic shot stopper. He's one of the world's best goalkeepers, but he's not one of the world's best with his feet. He's good with his feet, but he's not exceptional, which is something that Maresca would want.
So you think, having obviously watched Chelsea and Maresca a lot, to bring him in then, actually City's squad is not as catered to how he wants to play as maybe, naive people who just look at it like me and go, there's loads of great players there.
It's not an automatic fit. It's not like he goes in, right, everything's in place. I think, keeper, centre-back, central midfield, and he did with Rodri, but Rodri's going. He did with Stones, but Stones is going. Like there's transition there.
Right.
That does need to be replaced, I think.
Interesting.
From a Maresca.
How do you think he'll play with Haaland? Because that was such a big question ever since Erling Haaland joined the Premier League. Pep, even the great Pep Guardiola was questioned about, what do you do with Erling Haaland? How will Maresca deal with Erling Haaland? How will he approach it tactically?
I think you build around him. I think there are players that you adapt to. I think that if you look at the wingers are quite well suited. He wanted to sort of isolate his wingers and to be effective 1v1, and I think the profiles of Doku's one of the best, if not the best, 1v1 in the league in a wide position. Semenyo, similar, that kind of profile. I maybe technically would want more of a technician, but that seems pretty well suited. I think like Guardiola did, you've got one of the best centre forwards in the world. You feed him. Would he want a player that could probably link play a bit more? Maybe, but it's Erling Haaland offsets that.
Yeah,
I think so. I don't see that area of the pitch as much of an issue.
They don't have that many options out wide either. Actually, City have always, under Pep, they always had a gamut of players who could they could rotate out wide, and now they've got those two. And then
Grealish came on, didn't he, as well?
Grealish came on. That said something. Savinho's been touted about a move away, so I think they could do with a wide player as well.
It's remarkable, isn't it, Alyson, that we're sat here picking about Manchester City and suddenly they're bereft. They've got no players. 2 weeks to go, crisis. But it is interesting, isn't it, when you think about this idea of City and maybe this assumption that we have had for so long about their might and their strength, that maybe at least in the early stages of the season, we might see that, tested. Their opening 5 fixtures: Bournemouth at home, Palace away, Coventry home, Manchester derby, Sunderland at home. They're the 5 Premier League games before the international break. What do you make of some of the points Pete and Gregor are making about City and Maresca and how they might start?
Yeah, I think what you've got is the appointment of Maresca, I think, makes absolute logical sense.
Right.
He's a manager on a trajectory who worked under Pep and was very hands-on as an assistant and understands the club. And he very quickly made his mark in football, winning promotion with Leicester. That's quite a quick thing to do from being an assistant. And he left Chelsea almost on his own terms, really, because he had in mind, I'm going to be ready to take over at Manchester City. But watching the game in Cardiff, I did feel the loss of Guardiola more than I was expecting to. Right. I felt the players didn't look as scared to make the mistakes that they made. Guardiola was phenomenally demanding of the players, especially players who played well. You'd always have them always have a niggle in their ear about how you could have done that better. You could have done that better. I want more from you. Don't think just because you had a good game, I'm pleased with you. And that creates this sort of buzz of never resting on your laurels, always needing to do more. And I didn't see any player on the pitch from a City perspective putting in that little bit extra to try and make sure their manager wasn't going to say something to them afterwards about how, well, you might have thought you did really well with that cross.
Yeah.
But what about the time when you didn't, you know?
Yeah.
And Semenyo, for example, I thought he had a very, very quiet game, and I'm a huge fan of his. And I know he went to City thinking he would learn a lot under Guardiola, and he's not getting that now.
Yeah.
It might even be a setback to his progress, which I still think is on, an upward curve. So I feel we might see City by the end of the season with the players they have, and will no doubt get before September 1st, will be jostling for the places in Europe. But I think initially when you read out that list of fixtures doesn't sound onerous. But if they're going to be in that sort of transition of having played under somebody who was the most demanding coach you will ever meet to someone who no doubt is, but won't compare. I just don't think he'll compare. Yeah. That's the problem.
Chaps, then, I posed this question with Alyson and some of the guys last week. Are Arsenal then, are we looking at it now? I'm not asking people to predict who's going to win the Premier League title. That comes on Thursday. Are Arsenal miles ahead favourites, and it's a big group of uncertain chasers? Because in so many previous seasons, it'll be Arsenal or Manchester City. And I think that's kind of how I felt going into this weekend. It'll be Arsenal and Manchester City, and Alyson and many others were saying, Chelsea could have a dart. But how are you guys looking at it now? Are you actually thinking it's Arsenal's and City are in with Chelsea and others who could have a dart? Gregor, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think Arsenal are pretty strong favourites. I think, City, Liverpool, Chelsea, all changed managers, all in a bit of a state of flux. Transition season, as people like to call it, but they don't really happen for a club
not allowed.
Like any of those three. And behind that, even United and Spurs have just recently changed managers. You can throw Spurs into that, but it's possible now. I think we made some impressive signings over the summer. And like I've said it last season and maybe a bit the year before. I think like we're in a bit of an era of the elite not being quite what they were. Like
not so elite.
Era of sort of sometimes dysfunction, sometimes transition, sometimes regression.
Yeah.
For a big, like that kind of collective of teams, and Arsenal kind of pulled away a little bit from them all over the last couple of seasons, and also behind them as like the kind of the stats and the points back up, the kind of middle rump are a lot better. They've improved a lot. So that makes for another season of unpredictability.
Good fun. Great.
Yeah, I think so. And Arsenal, again, are just sitting above everyone else a little bit because of the continuity, because of the strength in their team over a number of seasons, and they're the champions.
Pete, first on that before we talk about Chelsea.
Yeah, no, I agree with Gregor pretty much entirely. I think, I don't want to say they will win the league because I think you can
Go
say...
on.
We don't know. Because of the unknown elements, you could get someone come in, take advantage of not having Europe, whatever, and just actually mount a challenge, and it's totally different. But certainly Arsenal are best placed.
Yeah.
And I think that was very clear over the weekend. There is a margin of their starting position. If we're doing a flat 100 metres, they're 10 metres ahead of everyone else. That's the best way of looking at it. I think also it was interesting we're talking about Vinny Jr. and you felt like Arteta wanted just something to go right. We really are 25 metres ahead. We are definitely going to run away with this, and that's what having someone with a starry signing might do. But to come back to a similar point, like if you think about some of the best players in the Premier League recent years, Salah, De Bruyne, they weren't that before they joined the Premier League, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily guarantee if you sign like Vinny Jr. that makes a difference. You can find that in other places.
Interesting. You just given me a good idea for a preview graphic for our Premier League coverage this week. Bringing in Chelsea, then you mentioned these teams that don't have Europe. That is the big line that people are saying about Chelsea under Xabi Alonso with hugely exciting attacking talent. Alyson has tipped them as outsiders for a Premier League title charge this season. And
I really want to know what Pete makes of Alonso.
Absolutely.
Because, is he nice to be in the company of?
He is, yes.
Is he a nice lad?
Really
Never mind whether they're going to win the title or not. Tell me about Xabi.
Do you
Is he a lovely
do you like
lad?
being in his company?
Yeah,
is
he's
he
really
nice to
I
have
think
in the room?
The first, so he had
Picks
his
his
unveiling
nose, I've heard.
No, he doesn't. It's Xabi Alonso. He would never do that.
I know he wouldn't do that.
I think at his unveiling, which I was quite jet lagged for, so bear with me.
Because
I'll try and remember it.
you've been coming back to it as well as to answering Alyson's very serious question about Xabi. You know, for listeners, you've been on tour with them.
Yes.
You're at their game at the weekend, so you're perfectly placed to tell us about the new manager and about how they're going to tackle this season.
Yeah, so I mean, at his unveiling, he was a little bit more guarded, and I think when we came into that, and he did a few minutes afterwards with the writers, and we just turned around to each other and went, "Oh, okay, is this going to be a bit like Arteta and not say too much at all?"
Yeah.
Perfectly pleasant. I think by the time we got to pre-season in Australia, in Sydney, and we had a sit-down interview with him, far more relaxed, quite clearly had his feet under the table. Yeah, he's a lovely guy, very personal, very serious. But he does have this kind of aura.
Does he?
Not just because of who he was as a player, but just the command in which he talks. You know, he says something to you, he says it, but there's a real depth to what he's saying to you. But he wasn't like one of those coaches, because obviously Tottenham were down there as well, and we interviewed Roberto De Zerbi. Roberto De Zerbi is like this very magnetic presence. He looks at you really, like reads into your soul kind of thing, and you're not quite sure if he's going to flip off the handle or say something really nice. But generally it was all quite nice. But do you know what I mean? That's a different kind of way of dealing and interacting with people. And I mean, with De Zerbi, I quite clearly got why players buy into him.
Right.
And the way he works. Alonso, similar, but in a totally different way, much more understated. Just that sort of, I'd say aloofness, not quite aloofness, but do you know what I mean? That slight separation.
Yeah.
But on the team and what we've seen, I think with the fact that they are not playing in Europe is a massive advantage, particularly because it looks like he's trying to change things at Chelsea. And he never said at any point, "I'm going to play a back three." He's like, "We're going to be flexible." That was his line.
Yeah. But what's he changing?
But we've seen that the team have played with a back four, a classic 4-2-3-1, and then as pre-season's gone on, and as we saw on Saturday when they played Real Sociedad, they played with a three,
right?
With wing backs, slightly hybrid in that you had Marco Palestra, who's a new signing from Atalanta, who's incredibly athletic. He's covering the whole ground on the left-hand side, and then also Pedro Neto was used as a wing back on the other side.
Right.
And but it's not like I'm saying he's playing with a three. It was quite fluid. He would drop into out of possession. It's a four, so I think we'll see a sort of hybrid of the two depending on an opponent. But it's a change.
Yeah.
It's certainly a change. I mean, Chelsea have been used to inverted fullbacks and Malo Gusto playing as an attacking midfielder. Like this is going to be different.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, there's still a bit of flux about the team, but the front three, João Pedro, Morgan Rogers playing off him, and Cole Palmer next to him, that looks really nice. I mean, João Pedro's had a phenomenal pre-season. He scored about 9 goals, I think.
Benefit of not being picked by Brazil for the World Cup.
But there's a few in the squad like that. There's João Pedro, Esteval William was injured, Cole Palmer didn't go to the World Cup. So that's a really strong core. As a three, they look great. Maxence Lacroix's come in at centre-half. They needed another centre-half. That's been a long-standing point of debate. Looks very, very comfortable, particularly at the centre, his distribution.
So what about this title tilt then? Where do you stand on that?
I think they'll need a little bit of time to adjust because it is a big change. I mean, pre-season, I want to see them in a competitive game, but they did concede a lot of chances against Sociedad. I think Alonso wouldn't have been happy with the lack of control, particularly in the first half. Where, like I was talking about Palestra and playing as left wing back, the way that system is set up means that there's a space there, and Real Sociedad took advantage of that. So the players just need to get used to the different spaces that they're conceding, and I can see them conceding a few goals. I can see them not having full control of games. Yeah.
Do you think it'll start
at least at the start anyway,
a little bit, and then maybe build rather than that kind of, because we had it with Maresca, didn't we? I remember on this podcast, idiots like me at Christmas were going, Chelsea are in the title race. And they had a kind of that run of fixtures, and then everyone was like, win these, and they're really in it, and they didn't, and it all fell away. Do you think it'll be a bit messy and a bit fun and a bit chaotic, and a couple of 3-2s to start with then?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think the uncertainty around Fernández, I think, is important, because I'm going to talk about midfield with City. You've got Caicedo. Alonso will love working with Caicedo. It's just who's next to him. It looks like he wants to play with a 2, so we saw Reece James play there.
Yeah.
which looks like that might be a more permanent role because I don't know if he will be trusted to play as the wing back. Just fitness history.
Pace as well, maybe. Yeah.
But he can play as a right centre back too. So there's ways of getting him in. But it's just you've got Romeo Lavia, who's a fantastic player when he plays, and he hasn't played 90 minutes competitively yet, and that's a big question mark. There's Dario Sugo, who they signed last summer, but he had issues last season. I haven't seen him, so I don't know how good he is. And then it's Enzo Fernández, and Enzo Fernández playing in that deeper role is not Enzo Fernandez's best position. You know, it was under Maresca that we saw him become more of a box crasher, a player that likes to get into the box and score goals. Yeah. That's a much more dynamic position than what looks like Alonso wants from his players. So Fernandez stays, it'll be interesting to see where he plays, because will he play more as a backup 10 to Rodgers and Palmer? Like he's kind of for me anyway, it's like not the most easy fit.
There was booing and cheering for Fernández. Yes. What was louder, the booing or the cheering?
Good question.
So before the game, so about half an hour before kickoff, it wasn't that full at Stamford Bridge. His name was read out. He was a substitute, and there were a smattering of boos. Like, oh, okay, this will be interesting. Yeah. Then when he came on, so about half an hour to go, there were a couple of boos as he walked up, and then when his name was read out that he was coming on, there were very loud boos. Like it was very loud.
Interesting.
But that was instantly met by then a response of supporters singing his name. Right. And then this carried on, in a pantomime fashion really. When he got possession of the ball, he got booed on possession of the ball, which I thought was quite strong. Like it's one thing when you boo the name of a player and then he's now playing for your team, to then boo him when he had possession was, oh, okay. But then there was the same thing again. The fans basically responding. So I don't know, it felt initially 50-50. I think by the end, the boos kind of went away. Like, they're not going to keep that up.
But you wonder whether that will become part of it as well. Not necessarily it would dictate a transfer whether it happens or not, but in terms of all sides going, let's just get this done, shall we? Because he'll be saying, I'm not going to.
But like I said to you before,
be doing with this, for goodness sake.
Like I said to you before about the Fernández situation, from a Chelsea perspective, they want this done. They want this resolved, and the fact that this happened, it's not done. It's like if that's how does a player feel about that? How does that affect what Alonso wants to do? It's a sideshow. Yeah.
Lots of interesting analysis on Chelsea. Just before we go to a quick break, we have to bring in our Don't Get Carried Away Chelsea correspondent, Gregor Robertson. How are you looking at one of your most intriguing teams, let's say, in terms of the discussions that we've had on this podcast? Alyson thinks they could have a crack at the title. Pete thinks we should be excited, but tempered with some issues to solve. Are you going to come in and tell me still a train wreck, still a nightmare?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of things they've done this summer that make sense. Some that I find really weird, and I would put Jordan Henderson and Danny Welbeck in that.
Do you think that's what I think that's exactly what they needed? Because I mean, the main some of the pieces towards the end of the season, not written by myself, but some other Chelsea, the dressing room culture was the main thing. It was, and Liam Rossini before he blew up was one of the first things he started saying. It's like we need. We need more maturity. That's clearly what the idea is. Yes, the age. Are they going to play? No, probably not as much.
That's what's weird. I think you sign players who are just to set the culture in the changing room is slightly odd in my. It was weird that
Gregor's just angry. You could have signed him.
It was weird.
Great pro in the dressing room. You don't need him to play.
I was a bad egg, Tom. It was weird that Henderson went to the World Cup. Yeah. Why is it not weird that he's just signed for Chelsea after having gone around the horses and getting moved to Brentford? It's weird for me. And Welbeck turns 36 in a couple of months. Yeah. It's weird. And it's also such a big pivot away from. It's like they're hearing all these noises about what people think, and okay, well, we better do something about that. And they're just going with a sledgehammer. Boom! There you go. There's two culture setters, but they won't play. Welbeck might get a game because actually I'm still not sure who's going to play up front for them.
I think Welbeck will get games, won't he?
He'll probably get games. I think he'll get quite a few minutes because it'll be João Pedro, and then they've signed Emmanuel Omega from Strasbourg. He'll be a player that will adjust. There's Liam Delap and Nicholas Jackson. Delap and Jackson weren't in the squad. Get the sense that Delap would like to stay, but doesn't seem like he's got a place for Alonso. I mean, they've only got they're not in Europe, so
not being in Europe is huge. I think I like Lacroix. He's a good signing and someone they needed, but then again they let Jalaba go, and he's probably been their best centre half for a good while now, and their most reliable, the one who stays fit. Yeah. Rodgers again. I said, of course, it's an incredible signing, but how are they making it? I don't know. Maybe explain that in another show.
Yeah. Their sales, it might take a while.
They're still perplexing. They're still addicted to signings. Alonso's the big unknown. Obviously, he was, the brightest young thing in Europe, and then had a very bruising time at Real Madrid. So he's got a point to prove. Big, who knows? But not being in Europe, will they finish better than 10th? Of course they will.
Yeah.
They should.
Yeah.
Last year was a car crash.
Chelsea are weird and perplexing. Gregor Robertson is back and the football season is back. We are officially cooking and underway. Absolutely interesting and fascinating stuff in this first half of the show. A bumper first half of the show. We need to go to a quick break, a quick quiz question to take us there. Christos Zolis became the first player to assist 2 or more goals in a Community Shield game since David Beckham in 1996 for Manchester United against Newcastle. What was the final score in that game? Find out after the break. Welcome back to the Game Football Podcast from the Times and Sunday Times. I'm Tom Clarke and I've got Alyson Rudd, Gregor Robertson and Peter Rutzler with me in the studio. We've been away 20 minutes with that quiz question. Honestly, can tell the pre-season lag. The World Cup lag is still there. People didn't even understand the question. No one got it right. The final score in the 1990...
I said 1-0 and there were 2 assists.
Gregor, 2 assists. Gregor thought it was 1-0.
I was answering the wrong
Pete
question.
thought he was answering a different question. Honestly, days have passed.
Come on, guys.
4-0 Manchester United was the final score in that game. Goals from Eric Cantona, Nicky Butt, Roy Keane and David Beckham, as well as assisting, got the final goal in that game. Sometimes I don't know why I bother.
I really misunderstood that. I really did.
Anyway, back to the news, back to the big news of the weekend. Alyson, I just wanted to ask you about the fascinating news at Liverpool. Fenway Sports Group agreeing a deal to sell a third of the club to a consortium headed by British Indian businessman, Amit Bhatia, which values the club at 5.5 billion. An expanded board with Elaine Saverin, the wife of Facebook co-founder Eduardo Saverin, and Brian Baum, who is representing Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, rather than Bezos himself. Where are we heading with football now? What are your thoughts about this latest news about your club?
I've heard Liverpool describe when FSG took them over as a distressed asset. Like, it's hard to think back.
Are you distressed by this news?
I am distressed. No, Liverpool, but I'm less distressed by the word distressed and the word asset. I think this is what football has become. And it's just a fact of life that clubs are owned by people who see them as a means of making money. And they're usually American-based because they think we undervalue our clubs in this country. And it's the most obvious example of this is Liverpool, that FSG took over, and we're talking about the club being valued in the millions, and now it's valued at 5.5 billion on the basis of this investment. You just think, oh my God, they really did know what they were doing when they saw an undervalued or distressed asset and went in and made it better. Now, what you've got to think about is what is the motivation of the consortium that have taken the 30% stake. If any Liverpool fans are thinking, woohoo, we're going to have loads of money spent on players, we know that isn't allowed anymore. So that won't happen. And it's not going to be a big splash of cash on the best players in the world. It's just not permissible. It's the same thing when there was a takeover of Newcastle, who became in theory, the richest club in the world, but they weren't allowed to spend any of the money. So it just feels like treating the club as an investment vehicle and a means of making long-term profit, which in turn means you make your money from merchandising and matchday experiences and hiking up prices. And that doesn't feel very Liverpool at all. So any Liverpool fans who, I think they're probably in 2 camps. Some think it sounds very exciting, a chance to cement the club as one of the best in the world. And then there'll be another camp of Liverpool fans who feel like it's just too monetised and threatens that the matchday experiences can only be afforded by wealthy tourists and not the local lifeblood of the club.
Gregor?
Yeah, just it brought to my mind an interview I did with Tom Wagner, who led the Birmingham City purchase and takeover. He's head of a hedge fund, basically, a Knighthead capital worth about 10 billion, I think. And when you speak to him about why he did it, it's totally like cards on the table. It's like the world is increasingly going to be digitised. If people are spending time online, the real value now is in real life experiences. and like match day, as Alison saying, match day experience, hiking all that up, making this the best day out event, human interaction, all that kind of thing. That's a big reason why they're doing it. And the irony is, all these guys made their money in the digital space.
Yeah.
Like, so that's another part of this. Yes, they undervalued the league and the product, but I think actually the way the world has sort of shifted and changed, even since FSG's takeover, that's another reason why they see this as such a valuable asset. It's only going to increase in value.
I always find it fascinating, the idea that they're seen as undervalued, and just in the sense of what that does for pressure on maintaining the Premier League's financial dominance and position. And within that, you're looking specifically at television rights and how they keep that bubble growing. Because it feels like when you look across Europe and you look at how other leagues are struggling, that there would be a plateau point, and it feels like we've been kind of close to that plateau point when you consider what the latest TV deal was. When you have this kind of investment in the bigger clubs, that's going to be applying more pressure to keep innovating, changing, and it just brings to mind, obviously, in Singapore, they've just done for the first time where they've got a deal where you can watch every single Premier League game from a Premier League Productions point of view. What kind of impact that will have on how television rights will continue to grow, and the expectation that they will continue to grow. And then if that doesn't happen, what is the impact on these assessments of these clubs as well? Beyond just what Gregor was saying about changing them, how you use the asset and match day experience.
Yeah, fascinating, isn't it? And I think, I know a few Liverpool fans who had a similar reaction to you, Alison, of a kind of measured scepticism, I think is probably the kind of phrase I would use to describe their reaction. It's fascinating that you could have a kind of takeover of big names and big money, and the fans of the club are a bit like, that's the kind of area we're in with football now, isn't it? Really, really interesting. So if there are more Liverpool fans out there, do get in touch with me, tom.clarke@thetimes.co.uk, with your views on this latest news for your club and what it might mean. To wrap up today's show, two questions that are kind of a bit similar. They might end up with the same answers, but in terms of teams that near the bottom mid-table who might give hope to Coventry, to Hull, and to Ipswich, in terms of one of the great things we saw last season. Gregor, we were discussing this in terms of some of the content we might have on the Times website. We loved so much about last season for the title race, for some of these surprise teams, but also the fact that Sunderland and Leeds both stayed up brilliantly, playing brilliantly, particularly Sunderland. I have a slight worry that this season we will not have that. I think Coventry will be great. I'm really excited to see how Frank Lampard does. I really hope he does well. Be great to see an English manager do well, and for him to prove that he can do it in the Premier League again. All that kind of scepticism around him. I think Ipswich look like they're putting together a decent team, and I think Hull will be great fun. Well, I think everyone will like them. I think you could end up ultimately with them all in the bottom three still. Do we think there are teams above them? Because that was part of it. Wolves obviously being a disaster last season. West Ham as well. Are there teams above them that give them hope that we might have a team that might be dropping down? Because there's a lot of flux and change elsewhere. It's not just at the top of the table, in the mid-table too. Gregor, I'll start with you.
Well, for the same reason that, Chelsea not having European football is a major boon, the teams that do find themselves with European football this season, Bournemouth, I think Brighton will be okay, but Sunderland, Palace. Like we've said it for a long, long time, the challenge on your resources, and particularly some of these teams haven't signed that many players, and they're going to have a huge challenge on the resources. I think that's where you get the biggest hope if you're one of the promoted teams. I'd throw Fulham in there too, because a lot of change, manager leaving, Arbeloa is a big sort of unknown as well, in terms of like, would he really have got this job if he hadn't had half a season at Real Madrid? Probably not. I like Shea Charles as a signing, but then he signed a couple of players from Real Madrid we don't know that much about. I think Garcia looks quite good and probably be quite exciting, but Fulham have got a good squad and they've played some great football and we've enjoyed them, and they've been, a club that's managed to kind of stay away from relegation fears for a number of years now. But just this change means there's a question mark over them as well. And Bournemouth, like Iraola set such a high bar.
Yeah.
Like Marco Rose, it's like the most kind of easy transition, even like the manager welcoming him into his office and just sitting down and having a chat for like an hour, and people saying, right, okay guys, we need to show him some of the rest of the club now. That was a good story. They've lost Senesi, Krupi Jr.'s out for the first few months, who's like the guy they're probably going to hang their hat on for goals. And again, playing in Europe, it's a great story and it's going to be great for the club and the fans, but it's a big challenge.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the promoted clubs should look for.
Bournemouth had a few injuries in pre-season as well, which I think when you want to, Marco Rosa plays a similar style to Raiola, it's high intensity, so not having the cleanest pre-season is not the best. I agree with Gregor. I think I was writing down and sort of going through every single team.
Yeah.
Maybe all of these. Sunderland, you think will struggle. I think they will struggle a bit more. They have been quite quiet in the window, but that's partly because they realised their squad is good. It was quite good.
Yeah.
What
Well, I mean,
14 players last summer.
yeah,
Too.
Kept Granit Xhaka as well, which is probably the biggest bit of business they could have done. Yeah.
Absolutely. But yeah, Fulham and Palace are the two unknown. I think they finished 15th last season. Yes, they won the Conference League. I think only Wolves scored fewer goals in open play than they did.
Yeah.
Pierre Sage is a well-respected coach in France. He came through the academies at Lyon, did well on the first team at Lyon, then went to Lens and finished second and won the cup. So there's pedigree there. There's a lot of sort of excitement about what he could do. But I think it is quite a step to then go into a Palace team that's coming after Glasner who really had buy-in from that squad. I think they lost 3-0, didn't they, at the weekend, and didn't play particularly well either. So I'm a little bit concerned about them. I did Chelsea and then I went to watch Fulham afterwards because I hadn't really seen much of what Fulham might look like under Arbeloa. And they'll look very different in that they're going to be much more aggressive. And that means that, Fulham have always had a slightly older squad. So we've seen obviously Shea Charles come in and the two young lads from Real Madrid. They just got to get younger, mainly because they got to play like that.
Yeah.
You're going to need you need some younger faces. Complete unknown in terms of what Arbeloa will bring for them, and that can swing either way. But I think their core is okay. They just need to make sure they score goals. They've lost Jimenez and Wilson, and I'm relying on Garcia playing in Premier League first time. Difficult. Muniz hasn't kept his fitness. That's going to be key. So both of them, it's goals. And obviously Palace have Mateta and they still have Sarr and Pierre-Emile Pino, like the players who can score goals. But if the team's going to drop into that, it might be them. But even then, the baseline is still that bit much more than the three that come up.
The other team's Newcastle.
Yes.
In terms of award for the most sort of chaotic and the in summer, it's Newcastle.
Yeah.
Losing the manager, losing their three best players in Bruno, Tonali and Gordon. Hiring a manager from Saudi Pro League. Signing, I think all the players are 24 or younger. So clearly there's a vision.
There's an idea there, isn't there?
It's a big change of direction. So,
and the mood's big, right? Like if you start slowly at Newcastle with a coach who doesn't have that much of a background that people know about in Eisler, and then you start slowly and then St James's Park becomes a bit like, where are we going here? This is all changed. This is not what we were initially sold. That can really...
I think all clubs are like that these days, aren't they?
They
in
are,
modern
true.
football. Alyson, thoughts on teams the guys put out there?
They're all very logical arguments. Palace, I think the key thing is they showed great resilience with the whole... the Glasner thing was a bit of a debacle, announcing he was going to leave.
Yeah.
And that should have meant that they started to spiral out of control, and they didn't. They went on and won the Conference League. I would hope from Palace's point of view that some of that is inherent robustness that doesn't just rely on Glasner's leadership, and that Pierre Sage can come in and build on that. They've got something there. They're going to be in trouble if that something was all in relation to Glasner and not in terms of something that they have as a group. So I hope so. Fulham are in need of signings. They definitely need signings.
Well,
and if they don't make any, they're going to be in trouble, I think.
That was my next question is, with 2 weeks to go, we've talked about some of the big clubs and the movements that might still happen. I think there's quite a bit of work still to be done down in the Premier League, and a team that we've not mentioned yet in terms of trouble, and I don't necessarily think they might be in relegation trouble, but Everton, I think, need a good start. We discussed it, Alyson, on a recent show about change and no change, and how no change can be great if you're Mikel Arteta, but no change can be seen as kind of stagnation if you're a team further down the league. And David Moyes is a manager everyone's known for a long time, everyone likes, everyone respects, but when you're seeing all these exciting new names around, I think there's a potential for Everton fans to go,
all they had last season,
we want something different.
What they had the new stadium, which I think boosted them along the way in
And
terms of
Grealish
morale.
for
And
a
they had
few
Jack
weeks.
Grealish, which boosted them along the way in terms of just an injection of fun and joy. And those things are not, the stadium isn't new anymore, and Jack Grealish probably won't be going back there. So they do need something to give because the Everton fans I know are not happy.
Yeah.
They're
And I'm really
feeling
excited.
a bit bleak.
I'm really hopeful that Hayden Hackney can do well, for example. But it's the same, Tyler Dibbling. I was excited about that as well, and barely played. I mean, it feels like they need something. They need a player. They need a signing. They need another Jack Grealish signing to just lift everyone and lift the fan base before the start of the season. Because I think there's a case for Everton fans, and maybe get in touch and tell me if I'm right or wrong, to be the least excited about the start of the Premier League season, because their manager's the same. They've spent, I think, 60 million, which, yes, is a lot of money, but is not a lot of money in modern terms. They've not got European football. What are we buzzed for, other than the actual football being back? There's something to latch onto. Oh, he's exciting. Oh, it's a lot of pressure on Hayden Hackney to deliver, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I totally understand why Everton fans, when they see everything else going on around them and all the investment and all the shiny new things, why they're a little bit like, this is, where's ours? And then they've got David Moyes coming back. But I think we can underestimate them. I think, they finished 13th last season, and I think if you looked at their points total, it would have been, again, for the same reason I was pointing out, in any other season, it would have been in the top half, further up the table. Yeah. And yes, Jack Grealish was big. We've still got element and die. They need a striker. They need someone to score the goals. I actually don't mind their signings. Like, Norgaard's a good pickup.
Yeah.
Brennan Johnson in a team that played sort of transition football could be a good signing.
Yeah.
It didn't work for him at Palace for whatever reason. I think actually Palace were maybe hasty, cutting him loose. Maybe something happened there. Tyreek George started to make an impact towards the end. I think he's a good player. And Hackney, we laud he's the best player in the Championship. I like seeing the best players in the Championship being given a platform in the Premier League. And I think if he's given a platform, he'll be good. So I think Everton will be fine. I don't think they're.
I think they'll be fine as well. But I think
I totally understand what
in
you're
the
saying.
modern context
That's not
about
enough.
fine is not enough.
No.
Yeah.
And so they could be 13th or 14th in November, and they might, if everything's left as it is, end up in 7th and get Conference League or something. But it's not enough in the modern world, and so that's why I think a signing just for the PR, just for the lift. Pete, who do you think, to that second question then, who are there a club or clubs, just to kind of wrap us up, that you're like, they really need something, or players? It can be top or bottom or middle.
Well, Newcastle definitely.
Yeah.
Still. I mean,
Spurs need a striker.
Spurs absolutely need a forward. Yeah, absolutely.
Spurs don't just need a forward. I really want them to get a forward, because you look
Good
at
one.
but you just think it's there. Gregor, you alluded to it in the first half of the show, and Pete, you spoke about meeting De Zerbi. They made some really good, un-Tottenham-like signings. You're mentioning some of the other clubs signing 22-year-olds with potential. They just went, Sandro Tonali, that guy, let's get him. Imagine if they did that the same with a forward. And I know it's easier said than done. There aren't loads of them out there. But rather than sign Liam Delap on loan on the final day of the deadline, go and sign a striker, and you're like, whoa. Because then you maybe start having a similar conversation about Tottenham that you do with Chelsea. Not about the title, but about a Champions League tilt under De Zerbi with no European football. Thoughts?
Yeah, he said it. He wanted a Bomba signing and he expects to get one.
Still not happened.
And it's not happened, no. And there's been talk about Gakpo, and there's been talk about one or two others. Yeah, I agree. They were all of their signings. They've strengthened the defence. Andy Robertson, Van Hecke, still got Van de Ven.
Pedro Porro, one of the best
Senesi.
fullbacks.
Senesi as well, of course. Yeah, they've definitely strengthened there. And Fernández and Tonali are great signings. Another sign of that calibre up front would be big. I think they could do it too. They could do with a wide forward and a centre forward. I'd actually say Leeds could do with someone to back up or to challenge Dominic Calvert-Lewin, because their reliance on him. And look, it was great to see him stay fit almost for an entire season and score goals. His career record doesn't suggest he'll do it again, or there's a good chance he won't. So
maybe they'll get Liam Delap on loan. Someone's getting Liam Delap on loan on the final day of the deadline, aren't they? That's nailed on. Surely, someone.
I thought Leeds were really interesting last season as their sort of evolution, the way they changed shape and the way they sort of, and then they looked like a really solid Premier League team, and it was also not really a Daniel Farke team, big experienced.
Two huge statement signings as well, like getting Harry Wilson and paying a lot of money and wages to get him is a huge statement. And they've essentially signed everyone thinks England's future number one once Jordan Pickford isn't the number one anymore. So if they, as you say, if they can back that up.
Yeah, it's kind of strangely sort of tranquil at Ellen Road. It's not like that's not this natural state of things.
Yeah.
These underperform point-wise their stats. So I think they will do one of the biggest.
They'll
be one of the biggest leaps in terms of progress this season.
Yeah, they're a really good team to watch. So another striker. We've got Lucas Nemecha, and he's a decent player, but I think, again, to take that next step, a striker would be an important one for them.
A big couple of weeks in the transfer window. You can keep up to date with the latest news on the Times website. We will leave it there for now. Peter Rutzler, Gregor Robertson and Alyson Rudd, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you too for listening. We'll be back with an EFL show very soon and with the regular show on Thursday. We'll see you then.